Hello, and welcome to the Fantasy Rewind podcast. I am your co-host, Dylan Stoll, and I'm joined as always by my friend, Michael Whifford.
Hey, Dylan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Now,
is that the truth? Because I don't like it when you lie.
I don't know. Who are you? Are you Jonathan Burgess or what? But yeah, so today we are going to be talking about the Sandman Episode 5, 24/7, which the inspiration for this show, or the show's episode title, came directly again from the comics here, where we have two episodes being merged into one again, with the two episodes two comic issues being merged into one episode again here, with those two comic titles being 24 Hours, and then also The Sound and Fury. So, with those two issues there, that covers everything that we see in the episode. Before we dive into what exactly it is that we saw and our thoughts on it, I'm going to give out the typical reminders here. If you want to follow along the show on Instagram, that is at Fantasy Rewind Pod. On Twitter, we're at Fantasy Rewind. And if you want to send us an email, you can do so with fantasyrewindpod@gmail.com. Send us all your thoughts, all your questions, any suggestions you have for episodes, or if you just want to chat fantasy, we're down for it all. All right, so diving into this episode, Mike, 24/7, The Sandman, Episode 5. What are your overall thoughts here?
This is a very iconic comic, an iconic scene. Oh my gosh, this is a very iconic portion of the comics. This is something that, as a reader, when I first read it, was very shocking and very, very graphic. And so it's something that I've held on to, scenes that that have really imprinted on me. And so I was very nervous how this was going to be displayed on screen. And I think they killed it, honestly.
No pun intended.
Yeah, no pun intended. I think they did such a good job with it. They got everything across. There were scenes where I literally had to look away for a moment. So they definitely did it justice, and I think it was done very tastefully in a lot of ways. As weird as that sounds, because it is such a mature and just jarring scene.
Yes,
they did it in such a way that the meaning behind it all was really conveyed at the end. What were your thoughts, Dylan?
So I think it's really funny that you said a mature and jarring scene, but it's more of a mature and jarring episode. So scene-long episode.
Sorry, I guess because it's in one setting,
one location. Yeah, but so my thoughts are, and I think you share these thoughts with me, is that this was probably my favorite episode of the show so far. And I keep saying that almost with every new episode that comes out. So that's a good sign.
They're all really good.
But yeah, episode 5 here, 24/7, definitely was raising the bar as far as the maturity level that Sandman has covered so far. Just the topics being discussed, the actions that we saw on screen there, the blood and gore, the violence, everything that we saw there was taken to a whole new level. I feel like it is suitable for us to just say this now, and maybe we should have said this at the beginning, but the discussion that we're going to be having today about this episode will dive into some more mature and disturbing topics. We're going to try to do this as PG-13 as we can, but we're still going to talk about what we did see on screen here and what was discussed. But yeah, all in all, I thought that it was a very good episode. I thought that the microcosm of the cafe offered some unique perspectives as far as what this ruby can actually do and how Jonathan Burgess manipulated it to fit his own whims. And you see the madness of himself kind of coming out with what he did to the other folks in the cafe there. So all in all, again, I thought the ending again was fantastic. Like we had mentioned in the last episode, this episode almost serves as a mid-season finale of sorts there, where by the end of this episode, Dream has reacquired all of his vestments, all of his objects of power, and now Dream is back at full strength.
And in fact, actually, he's more powerful than he has been in a long time too.
So getting into the actual episode here, Mike, why don't we start talking about what it was that we actually saw?
Jump right in. All right, so we start off here. It fades into the storage locker. Sandman is knocked out. Him and Matthew are knocked out, and Jonathan has reclaimed his ruby. I say that with quotations because it's really dreams, but he has made it his own, and that's important. Then, Matthew's trying to wake Sandman up. He isn't awake, and then goes right to Jonathan entering the 24/7 diner. He obviously goes in, he finds a little spot, and he meets Bet, who is the waitress. And she is very frazzled, a little frazzled, I'd say, and she's going between all these different customers. It's only her and the cook. And, this is where things start getting a little wild, because as people start entering, people leave. Jonathan decides, after his conversation with Bet, talking about how honesty is so important and that nobody should have to lie. And wouldn't it be a better world if there was no lying? And Bet's agreeing, because Bet is a very nice person. And, well, yeah.
So Jonathan shows her nice person. The meaning of the words, be careful what you wish for.
Yes, he does. And then this is where Jonathan just... again, the theme with him has always been, he starts off kind of being, normal, sort of,
maybe a little awkward.
Level-headed. Yeah, a little awkward, but slowly diving into madness, and that's very much how this episode goes. At first, everyone's just ordering their meals, having polite conversation here and there, and there's a little tension, a little drama with some of the different guests, but... it isn't until John just sees people lying and he's like, this isn't right. And he uses the ruby to keep everyone there and to make them tell their truths.
And so can we just pause for a moment here and say how lucky that first cook was that she left.
Oh, yeah, to get out of there? Yes.
And, how bad I feel for Bet, how bad I feel for all those other folks that were in there, but definitely Bet in particular. I felt really bad for her watching this episode because you could just see, this was a good person who was being forced into an absolutely terrifying and terrible situation.
Yeah, I mean, they all were forced into doing terrible and terrifying things. We're not going to get into, every single detail and thing happened, but I think it's important to bring up the comics and how it's split up.
Yeah, definitely.
So, in the comics, it's kind of, if I remember correctly, and Dylan will help me out here in just a moment, because
I have it handy.
He has my copy. It's split up with, every hour being a different, almost like a different theme, I guess. Yes,
exactly.
And they do different things, and it's very much like that in the show too. It's first they're all getting very frisky with each other, if we will, and kind of telling their truths that way. Bet finds out that the cook, who she's had a crush on, it does not reciprocate that crush, and in fact has been going after her
son,
21-year-old son.
Yes, important to mention 21-year-old. Yes,
it is not it's nothing anything like that, but. That was a very shocking thing. I was surprised that they,
as was I,
they brought that onto it. But after that, I was like, if they did that, they're going to do more, and they did. What precedes is a husband and wife splitting up. The wife having intercourse with a younger man, while the husband, goes into the kitchen and
has a burger and some extra dessert with the cook.
Yes, get some strange with the cook there. And then you have Bet, who, after being rebuked by
this cook.
By the cook. What was his name?
Marsh.
Oh. By Marsh. There is a young actress. Oh my gosh. She was in Shameless. And she's there waiting for her girlfriend to call her back or to meet up with a girlfriend, and they don't. I do want to point out, this is really important later on. So I forget her name too, but I know her girlfriend's name is Donna. She FaceTimes with a friend. Now that friend's going to be important later on, and Donna is going to be important later on as well. So important to keep those in mind as we go forward too. Those characters should pop back up again.
So yeah, if we want to talk about like some of the comic stuff here that we're seeing, one of the biggest things I want to point out here is that on the show we see this microcosm of the Ruby happening in the diner. However, in the comics, it goes well beyond that. You see the influence of Jonathan and his diner, or Jonathan and his Ruby influencing what's on television and the content that's being put out there, such as a talk show, like a kids talk show host telling kids how to commit suicide. You see like a vast, like across the board, across the world, like chaos erupting with anyone who has like a little mental instability going full on insane. You have people that are not able to sleep, people that are having just like waking nightmares, like all kinds of craziness going on within the actual world itself. Coming back to the diner, though, you see like an entire cycle.
I think that was supposed to be reflected in the world, and I wish they had done just a little bit more of that, either staying on the TV or having some things reported.
Yeah.
That would have really showed that, because at the end of the episode, when we see Dream in the world, like, it is like stuff happened outside the world, but you never really got any of that.
I mean, there was the TV on, but I feel like it wasn't to the point that it was in the comics here. We're like showing the magnitude of what was actually going on here. But like in the comics here, and again on the show, you see like Mike talked about like the cycles of what Jonathan like had going on for these people. He firstly kept them all in the diner. There were multiple points where multiple couples or multiple people were trying to leave the diner. They were basically told, no, you're staying here. They got up, got to the door, paused, turned around, and then we're like, oh, I'm here. Hey, Bat, can I have my order? Like, you know, all like normal. So, firstly, in the comics here, Jonathan like makes all their dreams come true for themselves, like in their head. Makes the one kid who was having the job interview, he's dreaming about being the executive director of the company. The one husband is dreaming about a sexual conquest. The wife is dreaming about murdering her husband. And it doesn't show what Bet or the... Oh, no, it does tell what Bet was dreaming about. Bet was dreaming about knocking out Stephen King from the bestsellers list and taking his spot, basically. And then it just talks about how like he goes from switching from that to making people start to fight. Like we have the cook assaulting the young woman there who's waiting for her girlfriend. We have people like anointing Jonathan as their god and carrying him around on their shoulders and cutting off body parts to write God on his chest in blood. We see him then make everybody have a little bit of introspection where he like has everybody admit all of like their deepest, darkest secrets and everything. Then he has basically like a massive orgy happen in the diner. And then after all of that, he basically has everybody like tell him his future, which I thought was really interesting because you saw like the hectate a little bit flashing here in this episode as well. The 3-in-1, the kindly ones, as you so eloquently put it in the earlier episode here. And so you have them kind of giving him his future and them telling him that you will defeat Dream, basically. And which he does. It's true. He then, though, Jonathan gets bored, and he then decides to have people stop, playing around a little bit and get a little bit more ultra-violent, to use a little Clockwork Orange lingo there. So, like, he has people nailing themselves through their hands down onto countertops.
Which we saw.
We have people... we have Gary and the young business guy fight, which we saw, except in the comics, there's a little bit of a different turnout where Gary is the victor in this version here, whereas the young man stabbed Gary in the show and ended up being the victor of that confrontation there. We have other people killing themselves by stabbing screwdrivers or something through their eyes. We have... Which does happen at the end, yes. We have other things happening, like on the show here, Bat's lighting a fire, Marsh is going to town on his hand with a knife, just chaos and blood and everything, violence everywhere. And then you see Jonathan just kind of walking around through all of that, weaving his way in and out, reveling in it in sorts. Like, he's so insane, like, that he doesn't actually, like, feel joy, really, but he does get a little bit of excitement out of that. And I feel like that's something that is conveyed a lot more clearly in the comic, where, like, it talks about, like, oh, I had them do this. I didn't feel anything. So I had them do this. I felt a little something tingle. And then when he had them be the ultra-violent and go after themselves, that's when he's like, I finally felt excitement. And so he causes all of this chaos within the diner. And then we have Dream come. But before we get to that, was there anything else you wanted to talk about in the diner scene itself, Mike?
No, I think you covered it really nicely. I mean, it does, for the most part, the show does really follow the comic in a lot of ways. I mean, it cuts some corners, but I don't think that really was a detriment to it.
I mean, it cuts some corners in some respects, but it also adds some new curves as well. So I thought, like, some of the new curves that they added in, and we talked about, like, Neil Gaiman being involved with the show and, like, using this almost as, like, a post-edit of the comic itself. And it definitely, I feel like this felt more in some ways than the comic, except for, like I said, the conveying the larger scale of what Jonathan was able to do.
At the end, though, you know, when John's just sort of standing in the wreckage after he's gotten that vision from the 3-in-1, Dream shows up. And I thought this was such a really important conversation between them, right? Because John talks about how, like, you know, it's important, like, this is kind of what he wanted. He wants everyone to be honest. And Dream, like, shows him that the reality John created is a reality without dreams to inspire people, to make them better. And I think that is so important. Such a really important message from this is that Jonathan was looking for this reality that had no lies and has no dreams, really. And that when you strip all this away, humanity is terrible. And in a way, he's right. Like, when you put anyone under a microscope, you're going to just see their flaws.
Especially if you take away their dreams and their hope.
And those little lies we tell, I mean, they're not harming anyone, and it makes the world better in a lot of respects, you know? So, like, you know, being nice to somebody, even though you may not feel it or believe it that day, like, can have a positive impact on somebody else. And Jonathan is stripping all of that away and just showing all of the ugly things. And I think that this was displayed in such a way that it wasn't portrayed in the comics, where that wasn't, like, out there as much, was it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in the comics here, it really wasn't. When Dream showed up, it was more of like, hey, you want my job? Come and take it. And
yeah,
it was a much more, like, direct conflict than this philosophical discussion than the conflict. I think another important thing, though, to point out as well is when Jonathan is talking about having a world free of lies, there are layers to that. And like you covered there, like, some of the little white lies people might tell each other are done with good intentions, are done to make people feel better. But it's also like a situation where if you remove all of the lies after building them all up year after year after year, whatever, like with that married couple, just talking about them for a second, if they were actually honest with themselves, honest with each other, then it never would have gotten to that boiling point. And, like, that's a point where, when we're talking about just relationships in real life as well, if you let things fester and build, it becomes an explosion, as opposed to, like, talking about things and dealing with them as they come up and everything. And so for Jonathan to remove all of the lies that he was seeing, it was kind of like just, like, taking away, like, their scaffolding, their security, their things that were their support they had used to, like, help themselves deal with all the tribulations of life to that point. And it just comes roaring out like a unfettered dam, just, like, rolling down a canyon.
Good points brought up. Jonathan had it wrong. But then we get the confrontation where, you know, Dream's like, if you're going to, defeat me, you're going to defeat me in my own realm. He takes me to the dreaming. Jonathan has some flashbacks from his youth about how which we don't know which is true or not, but his mom apparently like almost suffocating him in the crib to get him to go to sleep or to stop crying, and some other scenes there. But
right. Like, were those memories or
like,
were those nightmares or
was Dream trying to attack him? It wasn't quite. You won't know. I really like this ending. I know it pretty much almost followed exactly in the comics, but how Dream's holding him at the end, and he's so much bigger, and he's like, I never would have thought of destroying the ruby. I'd poured so much of my power in there, I didn't even realize. And like, the ruby was almost like trying to consume.
Right,
Dream,
and so like I just want
to
flash back here to episode 1, where Dream was practically doing that to the Corinthian, and like how he did that to Gregory, through like not through the ruby, but through other means, where like he was reabsorbing them in, and how he like started to reabsorb Corinthian into the ruby at the first episode before he got captured by Roderick Burgess here, and also just to bring up the fact that using the ruby's power here, Jonathan was able to overcome Dream. He was able to defeat Dream in a respect. However, the cost of doing so was the ruby contained almost too much power, it seemed like, and that's where it fractured and then split, releasing all of Dream's energy and like wiping the slate clean and giving Dream back all of that stored up power.
Well, and John crushes it, to be fair.
Does he actually crush it, or does like it...
I'm pretty sure, yeah. Because that's why Dream was like, I would have never thought... Thank you, John. I would have never thought about, like, destroying it. And, like, I saw it as, like, him getting him, like, absorbed into the ruby and then him going crunch.
Gotcha, okay. See, I wasn't sure, like, if it was, like, from the ruby just, like, self-imploding or exploding out there.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really...
Either way, the ruby's destroyed, yeah.
It doesn't matter. And then you have, all of a sudden, John's like, I won.
I'm
and
the
then,
king of dreams.
He's in Dream's hand, which is funny because Dream was just in his hand, technically. So, reversal there. He's like, are you going to kill me? And Dream's like, I don't know.
I could.
And you would think that, yeah, I could. And you would think that he would because of all the evil that John had done. But in the end, Dream's like, this wasn't your fault, technically. This should have never been in your hands. This corrupted you. This ruined your life, really. And kind of takes mercy on him, puts him back in his mental hospital, but puts him into, like, seems like pleasant dreams. A sleep that's just pleasant dreams. And then at the end there, we get our first look at Desire.
Now, I was wondering who that was.
Love that laugh. Loved their laugh.
So yeah, like when I saw them on screen, I was like, okay, so obviously, when they said something about brother, I was like, okay, so that's one of Dream's siblings. Which one? I was wondering if you knew which one it was, because I hadn't looked at the casting or anything like that yet. So
there is some definite... Desire and Dream have a very interesting relationship, where Desire really, I want to say doesn't like Dream, but finds it amusing to mess with Dream. And we're going to see some things that happen with that. And we'll see Desire again at the end of episode 6.
Okay. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting that Dream, after all this talk that we've had about him being wrathful, about him not having like pity basically for humanity, he shows a little bit of pity in episode 3 when he ends Rachel's life by letting her go into like a good dream and like fading out in peace. And then in this episode here, we see some mercy again, where he doesn't kill Jonathan. I almost called him Roderick. He doesn't like end him. What he does is he takes pity on him and puts him in the situation that he needs for like better help, basically.
Yeah.
And again, mirroring the
character,
or mirroring the comics right there, where Jonathan Burgess ends his like reign of terror by going back into Arkham Asylum in the comics. Not Arkham on the show, but still a mental institution.
Yes.
All right, so overall here, man, we talked about a lot of stuff happening in this episode, and how this was our favorite episode here. What do you feel like about the show up to this point here? Because like we said, this is kind of like a mid-season finale, so I think this is an appropriate place to kind of have a little bit of a retrospection on the show and just kind of think about and talk about the direction it's heading, where it's at right now, and like just our general thoughts on the Sandman overall right now.
Yes. So I would say faithful adaptation with some revisions, and I think they're very tastefully done revisions. I know I've been on some of the groups and stuff looking at people's posting, and some people are really taken to the forums and to the social media to let their displeasure known at some of the gender swapping of characters. And I think that is such a stupid thing to get upset about when you have other shows that have just taken the core of what is the story and thrown it out the window and made their own thing with the IP. We should be so happy that with Sandman, like, yeah, they've changed some of these characters, but it didn't change the story at all.
Right, like, so as much as I complained about like John Constantine not being in episode 4 or episode 3, and as much as I was kind of like getting after Lucifer a little bit last episode there, I still enjoyed their performances. I thought that was still a great show. And like like you said, I'd much rather have a show that was faithful to the adaptation, pretty much like the story beats at least, like this one here, and then something that twists and corrupts it to match its own agenda and its own whims of the creator of the show. And I think that Sandman is probably one of the best adaptations I've seen in recent history, at least.
Oh yeah, definitely. The show's been great. I absolutely love it. I am excited to watch it a third time at some point.
And I know
the episode's a third
time. Yeah,
time.
I mean, I know I will be watching the entire series again with my wife Amy here. But that's going to be at some point in the future, because we have a vacation coming up.
Yes, I know. Yeah. Yeah. But highly recommend. Just know that this is a mature show, just like the graphic novels were for mature audiences. So you may just want to screen it before sharing it with smaller ones, especially this episode.
Completely agree.
Very graphic indeed.
All right, but that's all we got for you guys. We hope you're all enjoying Sandman, or hope you're enjoying the episode breakdowns here. But on that note here, this is going to be Two Nerds signing off. See ya.
See ya.